In biblical times, people were married at a very young age. Girls were usually betrothed before they reached puberty. Majority of the time the marriage would have consummated when the girl reached puberty, and that was usually between the ages of 8, 9 or older. Note that when a girl reached puberty prior to the 20th century, she was considered to be an adult in most cultures. Societies. I will mostly quote scholarly sources to prove that marriage in ancient Israelite times took place at a very young age. Sometimes the girls who were married off were prepubescent. There was no law against a prepubescent girl being married off. Actually, as you will read further, you will come to realize that the Mishnah gave approval for a man to have intercourse to a betrothed girl, any time after the age of 3 years old. The Anglican priest Herbert Danby in the book, The Mishnah, translated from the Hebrew with introduction and brief explanatory notes. It says that a girl of 3 years old and 1 day could be betrothed by the brother's husband and he can have intercourse with her.
A girl 3 years old and 1 day may be betrothed by intercourse. Her deceased childless husband's brother can acquire her by intercourse.
Professor Gaze of Hermes, who is well known and a respected scholar, comments that prepubescent girls were allowed to be married.
We must remember that in the intertestamental and early rabbinic age, pre-puberty marriage was generally permitted. In fact, rabbis seriously debated whether bloodstains found after the wedding night in nuptial bed of a minor, i.e. a virgin in respect of menstruation, marked her first period or the consummation of the marriage. The women normally married as soon as they were physically able to bear children, which the law defined as 12.5 years of age.
Reverend Catherine J. Riss also makes mention that in 1st century parents married off their daughters who were prepubescent to much older men. What is interesting is she does not mention once that rabbis or anyone higher up in authority speaking against such marriages.
The longest New Testament passage on marriage is found, not in Ephesians, but in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. In stark contrast to the legal positions and social expectations of the 1st century, here the rights and responsibilities of man and woman are upheld as equal. Although marriages were arranged by parents, who often espoused their prepubescent daughters to much older men. The women normally married as soon as they were physically able to bear children, which the law defined as 12.5 years of age. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was probably no older than 14 when she bore him.
Child marriage was very common back then. Here's a list of age limit in age of consent laws in the 19th century. Christians were okay with child marriage and even practiced it throughout the centuries. Even at the time of Jesus, child marriage was all around him. It's even believed that Jesus' mother, Mary, was 12 when she gave birth to him. But before we look more into the age of Mary, I have a few questions for the Christians. Why did Jesus not comment about child marriage when it was happening all around him? If he was God, he would have also known that his Christian followers would also practice child marriage for centuries. Why didn't he abolish it if he was so against it? What is the definition of apocrypha? If you ask any Christian what the word apocrypha means, they would say something along the lines, it means it is not authentic or spurious. In other words, it is fake. This is a recent meaning. Originally apocrypha meant secret or hidden. This was the ancient meaning. History of Joseph the carpenter confirms that Mary was 12 years old when betrothed to Joseph. The history of Joseph the carpenter is a compilation of traditions concerning Mary, Joseph, and the Holy Family, probably composed in Byzantine Egypt in Greek in the late 6th or early 7th centuries, but surviving only in Coptic and Arabic language translation. Chapter 3 and 4 states,
Now when righteous Joseph became a widower, my mother Mary, blessed, holy, and pure, was already 12 years old. For her parents offered her in the temple when she was 3 years of age, and she remained in the temple of the Lord 9 years. Then when the priests saw that the virgin, holy and God-fearing, was growing up, they spoke to each other, saying, Let us search out a man, righteous and pious, to whom Mary may be entrusted until the time of her marriage, lest, if she remain in the temple, it happen to her as is wont to happen to women, and lest on that account we sin, and God be angry with us. Therefore they immediately sent out, and assembled 12 old men of the tribe of Judah. And they wrote down the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And the lot fell upon the pious old man, righteous Joseph. Then the priests answered, and said to my blessed mother, Go with Joseph, and be with him till the time of your marriage. Righteous Joseph therefore received my mother, and led her away to his own house. And Mary found James the less in his father's house, broken-hearted and sad on account of the loss of his mother, and she brought him up. Hence Mary was called the mother of James. Luke 24:10. Thereafter Joseph left her at home, and went away to the shop where he wrought at his trade of a carpenter. And after the Holy Virgin had spent 2 years in his house, her age was exactly 14 years, including the time at which he received her.
Infancy Gospel of James also states she was 12 years old when betrothed to Joseph. It is well established that people tended to marry early in ancient societies. This is neither a matter of debate nor controversy. Even up to the 20th century, it was not uncommon for girls as young as 10 years old to get legally married. Biblical times were no different. Despite the protests of some Christians, it is almost certain that, given the marriage practices of her time, Mary would have been married by age 12 and conceived Jesus no later than age 13. Historians are pretty sure that Mary had just entered puberty when Jesus was conceived. As a peasant in Nazareth, she almost certainly would have been married off around the time of puberty. In short, there is every reason to believe that the Virgin Mary, the mother of one of the world's major religions, was a young mother indeed. Psychologist Dr. Robert Epstein. Early Church Fathers approved of child marriage. The early Church Father, Tertullian, in his time, 150 years after Jesus, confirmed the cultural standard where girls marry by age 12, and for boys, by age 14. Scholars note that in Tertullian's homeland of Carthage, puberty was defined as 12 years old, the same as the Jewish custom. And that Tertullian was attempting to argue that unmarried women should wear headdresses in church. Furthermore, 12 was considered the age of consent for both sexes. Tertullian cited the practice of the heathens and determined that this was the natural law.
Even the heathens observe that, in obedience to the law of nature, they may render their own fights to the different ages. For their females they dispatch, sick, to their businesses from the age of 12 years, but the male from 2 years later, decreeing puberty to consist in years, not in espousals or nuptials. Housewife one is called, albeit a virgin, and housefather, albeit a stripling. By us not even natural laws are observed, as if the God of nature were some other than ours.
Interestingly, the great Catholic theologian Thomas Aquinas allowed betrothals to occur as early as age 7, and sometimes even earlier.
The age of 7 years is fixed reasonably enough by law for the contracting of betrothals, for since a betrothal is a promise of the future, it follows that they are within the competency of those who can make a promise in some way, and this is only for those who can have some foresight of the future.
Another question for the Christians. If God doesn't approve of child marriage, then why did he let 12-year-old Mary bear a baby at such a young age?
And Moses spake unto the people, saying, Arm some of yourselves unto the war, and let them go against the Midianites, and avenge the Lord of Midian. Of every tribe 1,000, throughout all the tribes of Israel, shall ye send to the war. So there were delivered out of the thousands of Israel, 1,000 of every tribe, 12,000 armed for war. And Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 of every tribe, them and Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest, to the war, with the holy instruments, and the trumpets to blow in his hand. And they warred against the Midianites, as the Lord commanded Moses, and they slew all the males. And they slew the kings of Midian, beside the rest of them that were slain, namely, Evi, and Rechem, and Zor, and Hur, and Reba, 5 kings of Midian. Balaam also the son of Beor they slew with the sword. And the children of Israel took all the women of Midian captives, and their little ones, and took the spoil of all their cattle, and all their flocks, and all their goods. And they burned all their cities wherein they dwelt, and all their goodly castles, with fire. And they took all the spoil, and all the prey, both of men and of beasts. And they brought the captives, and the prey, and the spoil, unto Moses, and Eleazar the priest, and unto the congregation of the children of Israel, unto the camp at the plains of Moab, which are by Jordan near Jericho. And Moses, and Eleazar the priest, and all the princes of the congregation, went forth to meet them without the camp. And Moses was wroth with the officers of the host, with the captains over thousands, and captains over hundreds, which came from the battle. And Moses said unto them, Have ye saved all the women alive? Behold, these caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to commit trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known man by lying with him. But all the women children, that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves.
Although many of the translations for Numbers 31:18 render the females as being women, a closer look at the verse, it refers to children, prepubescent girls who have not hit puberty. This is what the Hebrew text reveals. The Hebrew word taf refers to children only. Here are 3 accurate translations which show that the verse only speaks about female children. In case there's any ignorant Christians who believe Google Translate is more reliable than Hebrew lexicons, Google Translate also says it means children. Now, we've established that this verse is undoubtedly about children. Now let's examine the what for yourselves really means. What does keep alive for yourselves mean? When we read the verse, it does not give us much information what is meant by that. Many of the exegesis refer to Deuteronomy 21:10-14 as evidence that the female children were married off. The verse reads,
When the Lord your God gives you victory in battle and you take prisoners, you may see among them a beautiful woman that you like and want to marry. Take her to your home, where she will shave her head, cut her fingernails, and change her clothes. She is to stay in your home and mourn for her parents for a month. After that, you may marry her. Later, if you no longer want her, you are to let her go free. Since you forced her to have intercourse with you, you cannot treat her as a slave and sell her.
Contemporary interpretation of Numbers 31:18. The contemporary is a few hundred years to date. Commentaries also highlighted that the females were used as slaves or Moses's men married the prepubescent girls. A commentary upon the 4th book of Moses, called Numbers, Simon Lord Bishop of Ely, Simon Patrick.
Being young, there was some hope they might be brought off from idolatry, and become proselytes to the true religion. For yourselves, to be sold as slaves to any other nation, or to be kept as servants, or taken to be their wives, after such preparation as the law required. Deut. 16:17.
A Bible commentary for English readers, Charles John Ellicott.
Keep alive for yourselves. The Israelites were allowed to make slaves of their captives. Shortly after the capture of these Midianitish women, and, it may be, as arising out of it, the law concerning marriage with captives was enacted. See Deuteronomy 10-14.
A commentary on the Holy Scriptures, critical, doctrinal and homiletical, John Peter Lang.
The terrible result of the command was the death penalty to every male, and also to every female, except those whose virginity could be established, and who might become fused into the popular life of Israel without danger, in the position of slaves, handmaids.
The words for yourselves in Hebrew is lochem. Lochem here is a proposition. When we read from the lexicons and commentary, the Hebrew lachem, lechem, means to engage, eat or devour. This definitely is sexual in the context for Numbers 31:18. It could not mean that the verse commanded Moses' men to commit cannibalism, rather to engage, eat and devour is understood to mean sexually. This is how the earliest of scholars and historians understood the verse to mean. You saw how many of the exegesis refer to Deuteronomy 21:10-14 as evidence that they were married off. Let's read. The verse reads,
When the Lord your God gives you victory in battle and you take prisoners, you may see among them a beautiful woman that you like and want to marry. Take her to your home, where she will shave her head, cut her fingernails, and change her clothes. She is to stay in your home and mourn for her parents for a month. After that, you may marry her. Later, if you no longer want her, you are to let her go free. Since you forced her to have intercourse with you, you cannot treat her as a slave and sell her.
So we read from the law of Moses, spells out the purification ritual to prepare female captives. The verses require that the warrior shaves her head and trim her nails and give 1 month for her to mourn, before sexual intercourse. Although some of the translations try to give it a rendering meaning that no rape took place, a closer look at the verse tells us that these female captives were forced to have intercourse with the warriors. In fact, the Hebrew word inna, that is used for Deuteronomy 21:14, as forced intercourse, the same word is used in Lamentations 5:11, Judges 25, Genesis 34:2, Deuteronomy 22:29, Ezekiel 22:11 and 2 Samuel 13:14. In all these verses, the scholars who translated them rendered the word anu as rape.